The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
An absolute ton on the program today. Some Texas A&M and Tennessee ties that you might not be aware of. Also, Joe Milton gets called out by a national media member. We'll talk about whether or not he's been a disappointment. Tennessee picks up a commitment, and there is some recruiting news as we're getting to that point in the season. Tennessee goes into Georgia to get their latest recruitment, their commitment. We'll get to that. We'll also take a look at prospects like Daniel Hill, George McIntyre, Michael Smith. So a lot of guys that we want to take a look at. And as far as where Tennessee stands recruiting-wise with the other schools in the SEC, I'll ask you to grade them based off a couple of different factors. Remember, Tennessee has 2 5-star commitments at one very important position that we'll talk about, 3 4-star offensive tackles at a position that's very important that we'll talk about. So we've got a lot going on. Welcome to the program. It is a Football Friday, and also congratulations to Joey Kent as he will represent Tennessee in the SEC Legends series that will commence in Atlanta at the SEC Championship game. It's kind of a neat deal, and I'm happy for Joey Kent. It's kind of for those guys that are not exactly college football Hall of Famers, but that had a big impact on the game. I'm just going to stop and say it right now. Fred White deserves to be an SEC legend of the game. And Fred White, I talked to him yesterday. He did not know that he deserved to be a SEC legend of the game, but I told him. And he said, what exactly is that? And I said, they honor you at the SEC Championship game, and you should be an SEC legend. And he said, that's interesting. So I think we start making the push right now that Caleb Calhoun, we have got to make Fred White an SEC legend. That is the mission of this show. The show does not die. It goes beyond us. Whether or not you and I are of this world a year from now, this show continues on to drive for Fred White to be an SEC legend. Can I hear your message board on that?
Oh, I'm with you on that. Totally with you on the idea of Fred White being an SEC legend. It's funny. I went back and watched highlights from that Florida game in '98, and Al Wilson was the star of the game. It's really underrated how many big plays Fred White made in that game, though. He helped Al Wilson force one of the fumbles. And then he had a very key sack that snuffed out Florida's potential game-winning drive at the end. So I think, again, we always talk about Al Wilson in that game, but Fred White had as big of a game. And that game propelled Al Wilson to an All-American, because I'm just going to be honest, hot take, Al Wilson didn't actually have the production to be an All-American in 1998.
Oh, but he was the singular leader of that
team.
It
was I call them Lifetime Achievement Awards. Sometimes you give somebody a Lifetime Achievement Award because you're like, they just deserve this because of who they are and what they've done. It's like when Kobe got the 2008 MVP, because that's his only MVP. Kobe didn't deserve that MVP. LeBron should have gotten it. But they gave it to Kobe because it was a Lifetime Achievement Award.
I don't have a problem with Al Wilson getting it in 1998. You've got to factor some other things in. Please, somebody on the message board, help me straighten out.
Same with Leonard Little as an All-American in 97. He should have. They gave him that because he should have been an All-American in 95. He should not have been one in 97 because he was totally grossly misused, as you guys have accurately pointed out.
Playing middle linebacker, so oops on that. So, all right, here we go. Let's talk some Gary Danielson news. I know he's not one of your favorites. He actually is a guy that I enjoy, and he had something to say about Tennessee quarterback Joe Milton, and it was pretty pointed. According to the Knoxville News Sentinel, Gary Danielson said, quote, "I'm not critical, but I thought I would get more from Joe Milton." Danielson told the Knoxville News Sentinel, "It's not just Joe, though. This team doesn't have the firepower at wide receiver that they had a year ago, so it's a different looking process. And because of that, everything looks a little harder." We're going to get a lot of thoughts on Gary Danielson. He can be a pretty incendiary media member and polarize people, and that's fine. I'm glad to get your thoughts on Gary Danielson. Go ahead and put it on the message board. I happen to think he's pretty good, frankly, but I like an X's and O's guy that's probably got a higher football IQ than most people. But if you don't like him, that's fine. I think most of the people on our message board have a really high football IQ. So I think we're kind of on the same plane there. I didn't mean that to sound all snobby. But I'm willing to overlook some of the rough edges with Gary Danielson, Caleb, to take in his football knowledge. So before we get to the actual comment about Milton, your thoughts on Danielson personally, and what does Vol Twitter and Vol Nation think of Gary Danielson?
I think Gary Danielson's a great color commentator. He and Todd Blackledge are my two favorite. I used to love Bob Greasy too. I haven't watched. I don't know if Bob Greasy's still doing it. I haven't seen him in a long time, but Gary Danielson and Todd Blackledge I've always loved them as color commentators. And I'm already seeing this on the message board. This trends on Twitter a lot. People accuse Gary Danielson all the time of Alabama bias. Well, he's been the SEC CBS color commentator since 2006. Nick Saban got there in 2007. Alabama's been dominating ever since. I don't think that's bias. I think that's just accurately pointing out that they're really, really good, isn't it?
Yes, and I think they have been really good during his tenure. I guess if you were doing New England Patriots games, you would look like a homer if you were there during the Brady Belichick era. So
because if you point out Brady made a good play, are you a Brady homer, or did he just make a lot of good plays and you have to point him out?
No, he made a lot of good plays, and Alabama's made a lot of good plays. I've never thought that Gary Danielson was biased. I do think that he would tend to like the old school programs, but where his history is actually from where, if you don't mind?
He played at Purdue, if I'm not mistaken, and
So why would he have any allegiance to Alabama? I can't see that necessarily.
None. He has none. He's just been calling. Gary Danielson likes good football. Most color commentators, for those of you most color commentators in football are a little bit biased to good football teams that they're covering all the time, because that's how it is. Okay. That's just the way it works. I feel like a lot of times you see this all the time in sports. There's a bias to this team that's winning all the time. No, there's not a bias. They're just winning a lot. So it seems like there's a bias because they're just that good. I mean, Alabama's accused of getting favorable treatment all the time. I'm not seeing it, Dave. Maybe I'm crazy. And you've been covering Tennessee, and I know Tennessee fans would like to think that, but have you seen any unfair, favorable treatment Alabama or Nick Saban has gotten since he's been there? I haven't.
I think he has. I think Alabama has the red phone, pun intended, that they can pick up and get in the SEC office a little bit easier. I think if Nick Saban wants something to happen and it doesn't happen, he can say it publicly, and he has that kind of weight that the conference has to pay attention to it. Nevertheless, I want to get to Gary Danielson's particular comments, and those are about Joe Milton. And that leads us to today's tough question. It's brought to you by Andy Mason of AndyMasonRealEstate.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
All right, so part one of this, Caleb, has Joe Milton been a disappointment this year so far? Yes or no?
It's so hard for me to do this because I do like Joe Milton, but yes. I mean, yes, there's no way around it. Yes, we talked about him as a dark horse Heisman contender at the beginning of the year. He's not going to sniff any conversation of going to New York. No, he's not going to come close.
No. And I think really when you look at this, it depends on where you come from your preseason expectations. My preseason expectations brought to you by Andy Mason of AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Best prices, best service in the biz. Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. My preseason expectations would be that he was middle of the pack. My preseason expectations were based a lot on the Clemson game. So now that I've seen the quarterbacks in the SEC, I think he's probably still somewhere in the middle of the pack, but they're down as a whole. And I think that Joe Milton is a little bit of a disappointment based off what I thought he would be. Now, probably not as far as some of our listeners, because they thought that he was just going to step in and be the next Hendon Hooker. I never thought that. I had my questions about his accuracy from the get. I now think that the thing that's disappointing to me, if you're a Tennessee football fan, is you've seen Tennessee's offense have to adapt to Joe Milton's shortcomings. And that's where it affects the whole offense. That's why this is a running offense that throws a lot of bubble screens, because they're concerned about throwing the ball downfield and having a high completion percentage, especially when defensive backs are dropping back and trying to take away the deep ball. So given that has affected the entire offense, yeah, I mean, he's kind of brought down the whole offense. But that being said, if Cooper Mays plays against Florida, we're talking about an undefeated Tennessee team that's going to be highly favored to beat Texas A&M around 6 or 7 points. So are we even having this discussion if Cooper Mays is in that Florida game?
I think we're still having this discussion because if Tennessee's beating Florida, we're still looking at this at Tennessee right now and saying they haven't played anybody of significance, quite honestly. And so we're looking at the first 5 games as almost an exhibition season. And it's bad enough that they lost that game. Now, I agree. There are other disappointments. Cooper Mays not playing at Florida. You can't call Cooper Mays a disappointment, but what you can say is the lack of emergence at a backup as a backup center. I mean, this is year 3 in Josh Heupel's system, and they still don't have a backup center. That's a disappointment. And that's a call out to Addison Nichols, a calling out of Ollie Lane. And then also, I will say, to a degree, the receivers have been a disappointment. I mean, I not Squirrel White. I don't think they've been getting Squirrel White the ball enough, quite honestly. But look, it's true. Ramel Keaton dropped a wide open pass against Virginia down the sideline or over the middle of the field in the first game before he got hurt, and we're all rooting for him. But Brew McCoy had a couple of drop passes on slants over the middle that Joe Milton threw. Now, Joe Milton threw him hard, but Brew McCoy, we all felt, was a 5-star NFL receiver. So if you're a 5-star receiver, you make those catches. And don't even get me started on Dante Thornton. He is living under the rock that Patrick Starr lives under in a SpongeBob right now. So it's
don't get that reference at all.
Patrick in SpongeBob lived under a rock, was a starfish, and won an award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anybody else. It was a joke. And I'm like, wow, okay. Dante Thornton should get that award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anybody else on Tennessee's team right now.
Okay, if you rank the 3 disappointments, lack of a backup center, Tennessee's wide receivers, and Joe Milton, how would you rank them 1, 2, 3?
Lack of a backup center is number 1. I think every problem we're talking about is solved if Tennessee has a reliable backup center. The lack of receiver stepping up is number 2, largely because we knew what Joe Milton's limitations were and what he could and couldn't do. And you expected the receivers to help bail him out every now and then, and they haven't done that. And then, number 3 is Joe Milton. Joe Milton is he a little bit worse than I expected him to be? Yes. But there's only Dave, each game there have been a stretch of maybe 3 series where Joe Milton made some really bad throws. And outside of those 2 to 3 series, he plays fine for the rest of the game usually. No. And that's why I can't hate on him as much as the other 2.
Couple of comments. Travis says our offense minus the running game has been a letdown to date. David Michael saying take the money and run, Thornton's theme song. I wonder if he transfers again.
I mean,
you think he's willing to stick it out, or do you think he transfers again?
Do you think if he transfers again, here's what's going to happen. If he transfers again, don't you think eventually red flags will start to show up with coaches to say why?
I used to think red flags for high school transfers, and Nico did that, and Boo Carter did that. So I don't think there's necessarily red flags anymore at all.
Okay, if he transfers from Tennessee, everybody's going to look and say, well, you couldn't get into the rotation in Tennessee's offense when they had injuries and had a lot of talent lost at receiver, and that offense is designed for receivers to ball out, and you couldn't do it there. You couldn't do it at Oregon before then. I mean, at that point, you got to say, well, come on, who's going to take you? And also the tape is out. The tape wasn't as much out with Thornton with Oregon, but it's out now where, again, I have to say this. You're seeing a complete lack of effort. It's not like you're seeing drop passes or maybe he ran the wrong guy. You're seeing 100% apathy from Dante Thornton. And that's the disgraceful part. And yeah, I keep saying it. It's disgraceful. It's a disgrace when you have apathy out there. It is, again, he is just like Jamarcus Russell in the NFL because he does not care. And he has to prove me wrong by fighting for a 50-50 ball, because until he does, all I'm going to remember is that 50-50 ball against Florida. I know you called out Joe Milton. He underthrew it. But Dave,
I thought that was more on the receiver than Joe. That's a 70-30 receiver.
Tennessee signed Dante Thornton to go up and catch that ball, didn't they? They gave him some NIL money to go make a play on that ball, and he didn't even bother to go.
Okay, but that one pass, if he completes it, maybe the Florida game's completely different. So then, why are you down on Joe Milton? If Dante Thornton catches that one pass, that game could unfold completely different. And Tennessee suddenly has a downfield passing threat and scares people a little bit more with that.
Well, I told you I'm more down on the receivers than Joe Milton, honestly. Okay. Joe Milton's third. But I don't think you can ignore the fact that, like, again, if you consider Milton, and I bought into the preseason hype the way they were talking him up. I'm going to be honest. I did buy into maybe he is a dark horse Heisman contender. And nope, not even close. And that's where the issue comes into play. And also Joe Milton's, I thought his legs would be more of a threat. He's not used his legs except for one run against UTSA at all this year.
Let's go ahead and go here, and you can use it as part of the title, or you can use it as part of the thumb when we redrop this on Twitter. If Tennessee loses to Texas A&M, is it time to give a young man named Nico a strong look?
You really want to throw Nico out there the first time against Alabama on the road a week later?
Yep. Just like Casey Clausen. No question.
Wait a minute.
Casey Clausen made his first start against Alabama. If things don't go well, listen, here's the bottom line, and you tell me if I'm wrong. If you can't beat Texas A&M at home with Joe Milton, then you cannot beat Alabama on the road with Joe Milton. So you know you're not going to win there, so make the change. There's no question I would make that change, or at least get Nico in there for a couple of significant series, because at that point with 2 SEC losses, you're probably not making it to Atlanta any shape, form, or fashion. No, there's no question you're thinking Nico if you lose this game against A&M. No question.
Tennessee, that Alabama team that Casey Clausen got his first start in, went 3-8. Mike DeBose got fired. They literally propelled Central Florida to a Division I program by losing to them that year. That is the worst team in Alabama history, and Tennessee was playing them at home.
But Caleb, it could be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't care who it is next week. If you have to cover up your deficiencies at quarterback, then it's time to find a new quarterback. And that's what Tennessee is doing right now. Now, all that being said, Joe Milton could go out and ball out 28 of 32 passes for 325 yards, and everything's great. But you got to take a look at Nico if things don't work out this weekend for Joe Milton. You're thinking too about the long-term play. So maybe it's not a complete quarterback switch. Maybe it's just Nico comes in for a couple of series in the first half, and you do that sort of thing. Could you affect team chemistry? Probably, but I don't care. If Nico comes out and is the better player and he wins, these guys want to win more than they want to be Joe Milton's friend. So they're going to get one over really quick if Nico goes out there and is in his 2 drives is 7 of 8 for 182 yards. And I'm sorry if that hurts Joe Milton's feelings. He's a great guy. We've all said that. But if it doesn't happen this weekend, it's time to take a hard look at Nico in games.
Okay, let's unpack this a little bit, because I'm still on the train that if you put Nico in before he's ready, you could. I don't know about him mentally, but I still think physically you could wreck him. I think you could. Again, I think you could break him in half. And there is still the mental part too. Look, I think I've said this for a long time. I think a big part of Jared Garantano's whole career at Tennessee is he was sabotaged by Butch Jones. In 2017, when Butch Jones was desperately trying to save his job, he scapegoated Quentin Dormady, and he brought in Jared Garantano as the starter before Garantano was ready. And Garantano's first start was against South Carolina, and it was Will Muschamp's best team. And whatever else you want to think about Will Muschamp, he's a great defensive coach. And set Garantano up to fail by playing South Carolina and then Alabama in back-to-back weeks. I don't think Garantano ever recovered mentally from those first 2 starts. And that was also Butch Jones could try a desperate move to save his job. I don't know if Nico, I mean, again, you're right. Nico could be a lot mentally tougher, but it's not necessarily the mental toughness part because, again, Peyton Manning got his first start. I talked about this against Washington State in 1994.
Peyton Manning was skinnier too than Nico. That's what
Peyton
I don't
Manning.
get. I
Peyton
do I
Four
appreciate where
NFL
you're coming
offensive
from.
linemen.
Yeah, but again, the getting hurt thing, Joe Milton could get hurt. He doesn't look like a natural runner. Between the two, the fluidity I've seen from Nico on high school tape and the way Joe Milton kind of runs like a tank, between the two, all things being equal, I think Joe Milton's more likely to get hurt in a game. I think that Nico has a better awareness of the game, like Hendon Hooker. Remember him? He took 4 or 5 hard hits all year last year. For the most part, he knew how to avoid hits, and he was a very adept runner. So I think we probably got 2 topics out of that. Is Joe Milton a disappointment? And then if Joe doesn't happen against Texas A&M, should the Vols go Nico? I say absolutely yes. Your thoughts? David Michaels says, yep. Travis says Clawson, Alabama wasn't as good. True. David said Milton isn't consistent with throwing and he's soft like Thornton when it comes to the run, but Nico in. And then I get ripped with Travis, just like Danielson. Lust for Bama. Dave hates Joe. I do not hate Joe. Am I past that point?
Yes, you don't hate Joe. You were defending Joe after the Virginia game. You defend Joe after the South Carolina game, and I don't. So that's the funny part. And also, Gary Danielson doesn't lust for Alabama either. So y'all need to put that in the back of your head. It doesn't happen.
All right. Tennessee recruiting news as the Vols pick up a very significant prospect, maybe not the highest rated just yet, but Tennessee has a commitment. 2025 running back Dylan Lewis. What can you tell us about Dylan Lewis? And you can read about him, or defensive back, excuse me. Not running back. He plays running back some in high school, but he's projected as a defensive back, and I can't read my own writing. But what can you tell us about Dylan Lewis, Tennessee's newest commitment?
So this was a player they were targeting out of Georgia. He's not yet rated on Rivals, but he is rated on 247. He's listed officially as a cornerback. Comes out of Alpharetta. For those who are familiar, that is where Josh Dobbs comes from. Yes. And he is 6 feet, 180 pounds. He was fielding offers. Again, this is early and he's only a 3-star, but he was fielding offers from Auburn and Clemson, which is, I mean, that's legitimate right there. So for Tennessee to get him is a pretty good pickup. I think, and also Willie Martinez and Tim Banks both went after him pretty heavily. So I think this is actually a solid pickup for them. I think Lewis has the right size to play cornerback. He's obviously tested playing in Georgia, coming out of Georgia. And in terms of a scouting report, he ran track at the prep level, posted a 12.27 in the 100-meter dash in 2022. And you would expect him to be a lot faster in 2023 going into 2024 and 2025 because, again, he was he would have been a freshman in 2022. So you have to give him a lot of credit for that. LSU also targeted him for a little while, but he only took an unofficial visit there. Clemson and Tennessee were targeting him, I believe, the heaviest. So this is basically Tennessee beating out Clemson, which I think that's the headline of this because I said this was a trend after the Orange Bowl last year. If Tennessee wants to return to prominence, they have to keep beating out Clemson for recruits. And even though this is just a 3-star, they beat Clemson out for a recruit, and that's a big deal.
There you go. All right, some recruiting news as it is time for 4 downs. We tell you about the newest commit, but we've got more than that. What should people do if they want to follow recruiting with Caleb Giroux? Absolutely knocking out content, and he's Caleb Calhoun. Cooper, what should they do?
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
Thank you very much for that, Coop. Let's go ahead and get to 4 downs. And today it is brought to you by our friends at Zen Sports. I'll tell you more about them, but just let me go ahead and tell you, you need to download the app. 4 downs is now.
4 downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show.
4
downs. A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, so let's take a look at a couple of guys, and then we'll give you our thoughts on the overall state of Tennessee's 2024 class. Daniel Hill, Vols in the top 3 for Daniel Hill. Tell us something about that 4-star prospect, and being in the top 3 is pretty big.
Yeah, being in the top 3 for Daniel Hill is huge. I mean, this is a Mississippi kid, and Tennessee is fending off South Carolina and Alabama for him. Now, funny enough, there's a couple of connections because, Dave, you'll love this. Montario Hardesty is the one recruiting Daniel Hill at South Carolina. And Robert Gillespie, who was an assistant at Tennessee for a while, is the one recruiting him at Alabama. So Tennessee has a good bit to fend off to try to get Daniel Hill. However, they are in good position. Blowing out South Carolina 2 weeks ago was a huge deal for them in trying to land him. That can't be understated. And I mean, you talk about his size, 6'1", 231. And that's a heck of a size. So I think Daniel Hill, 4-star across the board. Now, crystal ball projections still have South Carolina in the lead, but I do think Tennessee will continue to. If South Carolina falls apart as a program down the stretch, then that's going to change. I'm just going to tell you that right now. And I don't know, Dave. It's funny. If you're Tennessee, I got a question. This is a quick question for you. Florida, you need them to lose another game if you're going to hypothetically win the East. If you're Tennessee, do you root for South Carolina this weekend against Florida because of that? Or do you root for Florida because you need to beat South Carolina in recruiting for people like Daniel Hill?
I would go with the latter. You?
I'd go with the latter because Florida's going to lose somewhere else, aren't they? They're not going to run the table in the SEC.
No, I don't think they are. All right, what down was that, Coop? That was?
Coop here. First down.
All right, now we're going to move forward as we're moving the chains, playing tempo here. What down, Coop?
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
All right, so we talked some Daniel Hill. Second down is George McIntyre. Listen, a quarterback that it appears Tennessee and Alabama are in competition for the in-state 5-star George McIntyre, who looks like a fantastic prospect. I go back to what Peyton Manning said, and when he was recruited, he didn't mind coming in and competing with 8 other quarterbacks. He didn't say that. I'm paraphrasing and exaggerating. He'd come in and compete with anybody in his class. He did not want to compete with somebody that had a year head start. So does that hurt Tennessee having Nico in the fold with McIntyre? Should it? How does the transfer portal affect that? Well, we'll discuss. And it's brought to you by Zen Sports, the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the promo code HOOKED. Download the app. Do it. That's right. Unlimited 5% cash back. Support our sponsors. We appreciate it. That's why we're here. Keep betting and keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. Gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. That's 1-800-889-9789. Must be 21 and over and in Tennessee to bet. McIntyre looking at Alabama and Tennessee. How does that play into the earlier discussion that we've had about whether or not a guy named Nico gets playing time? If he doesn't play at all, I would think McIntyre would say, hey, I got a great chance to go in and win that job. If he plays and he plays well, I'm McIntyre and I'm saying, hey, I don't know that I can win that job. But now there's a transfer portal, so maybe I can go somewhere else. What all must be going through this young man's mind right now? And maybe more importantly for our listeners and our viewers, what does Tennessee have to do with a highly touted freshman quarterback on the roster to beat Alabama? Because that's 2 strikes against you in the recruiting game from the get.
So I don't think they have to worry about the Nico situation because I don't think Nico will be at Tennessee after 2025. And he's in the 2025 class, not the 2024 class. So he's 2 years behind Nico. So
okay, but here's the discussion I was having with somebody about Walter Nolan, why he couldn't come back to Tennessee, and there are rumors that he wanted to transfer. Well, he's locked into NIL deals. So if McIntyre signs up to be a Vol, being at the quarterback position, you could find these guys being contractually obligated to get all of their money, especially if you backload contracts and you say you get paid more in the third year. There could be financial incentive to stay. So I don't think it's as cut and dry. Let's just say, for instance, Nico said, I want to stay 5 years because I love the college experience, or 4 years because I love the college experience. Well, then, McIntyre would have to look at that.
Do you honestly think those NIL deals are that ironclad, though? Because Nico could go first in the NFL draft and they could say, you have to pay us back the money. He's like, okay, I got NFL money now. I'll pay you that back easily. I mean, that's not that.
Well,
nobody's going to sign an NIL deal that requires them to stay past 3 years.
But they could sign an NIL deal that is lucrative enough that if they enjoy college football, I mean, that was the thing that Peyton Manning did. He committed to Tennessee, or recommitted, you should say, came back for his senior year because finances weren't an issue.
He didn't want to go to the Jets. That's why he came back.
That's not the reason.
That's the reason.
Finances, that may have been the third on the list. The first two were, they had plenty of cash. The Mannings have done all right. And number two, he liked college. And I believe
either way, though, I mean, if you're George McIntyre, okay, you're 2 years behind Nico. You can redshirt, and then you still will have 3 years of eligibility when Nico's out of eligibility. So I think the issue for George McIntyre, you just have to think you can beat out Jake Merklinger. And I think he would beat out Jake Merklinger. Now, the one selling point is, look, if Alabama doesn't have a quarterback past Jalen Milroe because they missed on a few, as we've seen recently, then you might see a little bit of a change. But I do think that, look, I think McIntyre would, you're going to have to embrace some competition when you're at Tennessee, even if you're not the guaranteed starter at the start. And so I think that's all the situation he's in. I think this will be fine. But Dave, you just broke some news to me. So Walter Nolan does want to go back to Tennessee, but he's locked in for NIL. That's what
No. I was talking about somebody that it might not be as easy because you're talking about A&M, one of the best collective funds. He's already locked in making money there. Why would you want to up and make the transition if you're playing, and if you're playing for a respectable, not great, not as good as Tennessee program right now? But let's get to third down. We're getting a little bit sidetracked. No, I'm not saying he made that decision based off that, but I'm sure that was a factor. Here we go. Third down, Coop.
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Tennessee trying to flip tight end Michael Smith. And Tennessee, I tell you what, with the way they have developed tight ends, we talk about the way they have developed wide receivers, but Princeton Fat and now Jacob Warren, our own on the Vol Report. And I think you're going to see great things out of Ethan Davis. Who's the young man from Europe whose name suddenly escapes me?
Emmanuel Okoye.
Yeah, Emmanuel Okoye, I think, is another one. You're going to see him develop. I would not be surprised if 5 years from now we're talking about Tennessee being known as, as tight end U.
That sounds
sorry for
funny.
the sneeze.
No, the sneeze doesn't sound funny. The phrase tight end U sounds funny.
Tight end U, yes.
Okay, sorry. My mind just goes places, guys. I apologize.
You can see that when Tennessee has, other than Jason Witten, no real tight end threats throughout their modern era history, other than Jason Witten, it could become tight end U. And you've seen that Tennessee is dedicated to keeping the tight end in there when they could play four wide. So let's get to the last down, and it is which one?
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
All right, grade Tennessee's recruiting class right now. They are number 9 in the nation. Where does that put them in the SEC, Caleb?
I need to pull up the full rankings for the SEC, but I believe it puts them like 6th in the future SEC, which is they're behind Georgia, Florida, A&M, Alabama. Okay, they're 5th in Oklahoma. Georgia, Florida, A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. So they're 6th in the current SEC, one spot ahead of LSU. Look, for me, that's a B plus. I don't think it's like a B minus or a concern because Tennessee can coach. Tennessee's coaching will have the talent playing about like 4 spots higher than where its recruiting class is. So I think that's a good sign for them. Also, I'm just going to say this up front, Dave. I don't think that Florida and A&M class holds. If Tennessee beats A&M this weekend and you start hearing some rumblings about Jimbo Fisher, NIL can only go so far, am I right? If you know you're going to a school and you're thinking about the NFL and the coach might get fired, that might trump NIL, whatever they can offer.
Here's why this to me is an A, borderline A plus class. You have 2 5-star commitments overall. You have 3 4-star offensive lineman commitments. Get the big dogs. And we're talking about really good big dogs. Now, I think Vyson Lang is going to end up being a great player. But when I saw him in high school, I thought he looked a little bit soft. And I thought that that's a 3-star guy that maybe plays towards the end of his career. I think he's better than that. But you're going to have a greater success rate if you're getting the 4 or 5-star guys, right? So they've got 3 of those guys probably still a little bit behind the curve and not much they can do without taking somebody out of the transfer portal for the offensive line in 2024. But I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I give it an A, and I'm borderline A plus. And I think Tennessee closes and ends up in the top 5 from what I'm hearing.
Okay. I mean, I could definitely.
That's not from Tennessee. That's outside.
Look, and you know better than I do too. Like half of unless you're Alabama, where you can just get the best players of your pick of the litter, or Georgia. If you can't get in that top 3, the most important recruiting for a need is as important as just recruiting, isn't it? Addressing your needs.
Yes.
And I think Tennessee would you say Tennessee is probably long-term? They're always going to be a school that kind of has to address needs, right? They can't just recruit the top guys no matter what. They're going to have to think a little bit more meticulously about needs down the road. And
well, it depends how big their footprint is.
True. Okay. So
are they going to go California to South Carolina?
Will the 90s ever come back for Tennessee? Put it that way. Fulmer just recruited the best players, right? He never really had to care about need because he knew he was going to get load up on talent no matter what. And
I think last year you were less than halfway there. I think this year you're more than halfway there of walking into a room of anybody, literally anybody, and saying, hey, I see you got 5 stars next to your name. I see Alabama and Georgia are coming, but we're going to come talk to you too. And we think you should come play for Tennessee. Yes, I think they're there. I think they're past that point. There was a point that they had to evaluate early, get a few steals because of early offers, and then run some kids. I think they're kind of past that point, Caleb. I think from this point forward, recruiting only gets better and better and better for Tennessee, except for, of course, if the bottom falls out of the season, which I don't believe will happen. And by bottom falling out, I want to be really clear. 8 wins is not bottom falling out. That's not how a prospect is going to view it. As a matter of fact, he'll view it as a trending up prospect with some need for immediate playing time. Caleb, that's how you'll spin that. I should have been a recruiter. I would have been great.
Well, okay. So looking at that, okay, so fine. Recruiting for need. 2024 class is based on need. Offensive line, 2 5 stars for the splash. It's still largely based on need, but because it fills needs, I think it goes from a B plus to an A minus because Tennessee is still in a roster situation where they have to address some needs.
But let me ask you this.
They can't reload yet.
There were 2 eras of Philip Fulmer recruiting, right? There was the 90s era in which he got basically anybody he wanted out of Georgia and the Carolinas, right? Okay. Yep. And then there was the next era where they pick up a guy named Arian Foster in Arizona, where they find a guy named Casey Clausen, and they go up and they get an Eric Ainge out of Oregon, and Tennessee widened its footprint. I think that the first one was better, but not by a lot. The second one, I think Tennessee is doing it right now. I don't think it's dominating Georgia or South Carolina like Tennessee in the 90s, but as far as the 2010s, when Philip Fulmer was still there before the wheels started to come off, I think Tennessee is there right now in recruiting. They can go out west and get a top quarterback. They're golden.
But Tennessee had to be the problem with Philip Fulmer. We talk about discipline derailing the program. One of the reasons discipline derailed the program, because Mark Richt was at Georgia and Alabama and South Carolina had shored up, Philip Fulmer couldn't be as particular about character when he recruited guys in that second leg. He had to be he had to have a little bit longer of a leash. Now, he wasn't Lane Kiffin in 2009. It was like, I don't care about a player's background. I'll take him in a heartbeat. But I think in the 90s, he could be a little more specific. Like, I think Fulmer looked past baggage in the 2000s because he knew that he was going to have more competition with Georgia.
Yep. For those asking, Fred White not able to join us today, but he will join us on that Sunday show with Fred. And that's brought to you by Herald Group Security Solutions, leadership, experience, specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques. Take a second and listen to me, please, and support our sponsors. But this one's particularly important. they make your children safer. And that's with school security that comes from guys that are trained for 60 days. They can work with private schools now. We're pushing to make it a public school thing too. So go to your school administrator, have them push the congressman, do what you need to do, because we can get real trained people to protect our children. Harrell Group Security Solutions. Go to your school administrator, say we got to have them. Harrell Group Security Solutions. In 2 minutes, Joey Kent, and we discuss back in the day, it seemed like the quarterback or the coach or the receivers were most important. How has that changed, if at all? 2 minutes with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
These mountains hold and defend a spirit far better than moonshine. A drink that holds flavor that becomes necessity. A hard cider made and relished by folk who are as hearty as they are legend. A refreshment that can only be found in one place. With a taste that makes you say, give me 3 bottles of the good stuff. Tennessee Cider Company, where necessity can be found.
Who's this guy?
Hello, who is it?
The Dave Hooker Show.
Who?
A presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Let me be real clear. I think that Joe Milton's going to play well this week. I think Tennessee's going to play well. And I'm leaning towards Tennessee with an easy win because I told Caleb I was going to go left of everybody else. So don't hate Joe. Not at all. I think he's going to do well. But if he doesn't and he struggles because of the hamstring that he's got in this offense, you're going to have to take a look at Nico. That is just my prediction. We have a prediction that Joe Stradamus throws for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Maybe. Then you're great. Everything's good. Roll on. But if not, you're going to have to think about Nico. But more a topic at hand. I thought this was super cool. We reached out to him. We didn't hear from him. We hope to get him on the show today, but that's not going to happen. SEC legend, the class of 2023 was announced. Here's what an SEC legend is. At the SEC championship game, they're honored throughout the last part of the week, and they're honored during the game. So Joey Kent on the receiving end of so many of those Peyton Manning passes, he receives the honor. So I'm curious how you look at the 2 best offensive minds. Well, let me say 2 of the best 3. The best 3 offensive minds to ever be at the University of Tennessee are these 3. Josh Heupel, Lane Kiffin, and David Cutcliffe. Do you disagree with those 3?
I mean,
one produced a lot of NFL quarterbacks, went to programs that had all kinds of restraints in one. The other one we know is an offensive guru, and the one is currently coaching for Tennessee that has similarities to the old offensive guru.
My pushback on Lane Kiffin is like, does Lane Kiffin outdo Walt Harris of the 80s under Johnny Majors or Doug Dickey introducing the slot T formation in the 1960s or Robert Nealon bringing in, or MB Banks bringing in the single wing in 1926 when everybody was in the short punt formation back then. I mean, it's
what do we
relevant.
define modern era?
Post integration.
Okay,
I
which
say
year?
post integration.
What year's
which
that?
is give or take 1967 to 1974 in the SEC.
Okay, so and out of that, I would say Cutcliffe, Kiffin, and Cutcliffe,
Heupel.
Kiffin, and Heupel are the top 3 offensive minds. We could debate that, but let's look at it undercut. So you had Joey Kent, who was on the receiving end of so many of those Peyton Manning passes, and let's face it, that offense made Kent probably look a little bit better than he was. I think the NFL proved that out. But under David Cutcliffe's offense, where would you rank the importance of quarterback, coach, receivers?
So I always do this. For me in college, it's unless it depends on how good each one is. And so the reason I bring that up is, like, if Randy Moss is on your team, it's receiver number 1, because you know this, Dave. Randy Moss is a transcendent receiver and can he made Dante Culpepper look like an NFL quarterback. Okay, so but if you don't have Randy,
he also made Chad Pennington look like a Heisman contender.
Oh, yeah.
College, Marshall.
That is very true.
Friend of the program, Chad Pennington.
So if you have a transcendent talented receiver like that, all of a sudden receiver may move up. But unless you have a transcendent talent like that, generally in college, it's coach, quarterback, receiver. In the NFL, it's quarterback, coach, receiver on a general sense. So, with Tennessee, I think with Peyton Manning, you could have made a debate, Peyton Manning or David Cutcliffe, but Cutcliffe did have success after that. So I give Cutcliffe the slight edge. Joey Kent was a distant third. I mean, I'm sorry. I hate to say that, but a distant third. And my evidence for that is Joey Kent graduates in 96 after back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Marcus Nash comes in and just shatters Joey Kent's numbers in 1 year and has an even better year. And by the way, even still to this day, in this offensive explosion of Tennessee, only once have they had 3 straight years with a 1,000-yard receiver. Just happened to be Peyton Manning's sophomore, junior, and senior year.
Okay, so you're telling me that under Cutcliffe, it was coach, quarterback, receiver in that order?
Yeah, I think it's always in college, coach, quarterback, receiver.
Okay, so under Heupel, different approach. Is it the same? Coach, quarterback?
Yes.
Receiver.
Yes, coach, quarterback, receiver. I actually almost questioned my own philosophy on that in the offseason. I thought maybe it's coach, receiver, quarterback, because Heupel has to have good Heupel has to have good receivers. But look, going from Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton, I think it's very clear that quarterback's more important than receiver at this point.
Great point. I think in the summer, you could have made a great argument for receivers being number 2, and the quarterback just kind of sits in there and is a game manager. Like, Hendon Hooker was not a game manager last year. He just made a bunch of big plays. Now you're seeing what a game manager is, and there's a limitation on what you're able to do. There's no limitation on my sight. Well, I can't go X-ray yet, but with my LASIK, I can see, and it's fantastic. No contacts, no glasses. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Enjoy life when you see better. Local vision service for LASIK, cataract surgery, and regular eye examination. And being a little hard on Joey Kent. That's fine.
I think, look, Joey Kent's a great guy. Okay, but Dave, vacuum. And I made this. The reason I'm a little hard is because if you go through any blog, newspaper, whatever, subjective analysis ranking Tennessee receivers, and this is just a personal thing for me, because of the numbers, you see Marcus Nash and Joey Kent consistently ranked ahead of Peerless Price. My issue with that is that doesn't take into account who Peerless Price had him throwing him the ball when he was the number 1 receiver, and who Marcus Nash and Joey Kent had throwing them the ball when they were the number 1 receivers.
Well, if you think either one of those guys are better than him, I just don't know what to say.
But they're always consistently ranked ahead of him because of their production in college. But I'm like, their production was because of Peyton Manning throwing them the football.
Yeah, so, I mean, Peerless Price is the best receiver of the 90s. Well, unless you want to get into those, I guess Pickens bled over, and some of those guys bled over to the early 90s. But for that run, for that run, Peerless was the best one. Hemp House, premier, just absolute incredible hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. Use the promo code HOOKED. That's HOOKED, and it's at Hemp House Chat, 2 T's right below. Hemp House Chat, 2 T's right below. And don't forget, they've got the Big Orange Crunch that is 50% off after a Tennessee win, which may well happen this weekend against Texas A&M. And then we've got some deep ties that Caleb is going to make us aware of. He knows more about the Aggies and Vols than you do, and he's willing to prove it. Right after this, with Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker, back in 2 minutes. You're not going to believe these ties, in all sincerity. Hang tight.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
These mountains hold and defend a spirit far better than moonshine. A drink that holds flavor that becomes necessity. A hard cider made and relished by folk who are as hearty as they are legend. A refreshment that can only be found in one place. With a taste that makes you say, give me 3 bottles of the good stuff. Tennessee Cider Company, where necessity can be found.
Who's this guy?
Hello, who is it?
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports,
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
You're not going to believe these stats. It's just breaking down. I just got this from Pro Football Focus, so we're a little out of order here. I don't know how you want to handle that for our content batching, or whatever we call it. But I just got these stats. So Joe Milton stats that you won't believe right now of all Twitter. So listen in and let me give you a breakdown. Now, this is according to Pro Football Focus that you really like, right?
I think Pro Football Focus has major flaws. It's one thing I take into account among a lot.
Here's some stats. Let me throw those at you. And do you think they're going to be good or okay, or do you think these are going to be really bad?
I think these stats are going. I think where you're coming with you're not going to believe it. Leads me to believe these stats will be highly misleading. But let's see. Let's see what we got.
Okay, so here we go. Now this is from Eric Kane of VolQuest, who I believe got it through Pro Football Focus. So we're getting it through Josh Ward. So there you go. Kane said Milton is 8 of 30 on passes 20 yards down the field. Can you do the percentage of 8 of 30 for me real quick? What percentage is that?
That is, let's see, 415. We're talking under 25%. Yeah, it's the lowest in FBS. I know that.
Okay. And then he's 11 of 27 on passes 10 of 19 yards. So that's about 30%. So you're looking at a quarterback that outside of 9 yards is roughly 35%. Joe Milton is 35 of 44 on passes 0 to 9 yards. So in other words, you can throw the bubble screen all day and help your passing statistics as far as your completion percentage, but that ball goes further down the field than 9 yards. You've only got a 35 to 40% chance of completing it. That's not good. That's troublesome.
Yeah, they brought up that stat in the South Carolina game. And by the way, I was wrong. PFF, that stat is not misleading. That's a true stat. I thought you were going to bring up Joe Milton's just overall averages, yards per attempt, adjusted yards, and things like that. And I would have considered that misleading. No, this is bad. And Joe Milton was dead last among starting quarterbacks in FBS 2 weeks ago on passes beyond the line of scrimmage. So it's not good. And it's not all his fault. But yeah.
You look at the numbers real quick. Joe Milton is 10th in overall passing rating. That's not good. And then if you want to break it down by completion percentage, which is what this stat that we just got into is referring to, he's ninth at 63%. But again, down the field, further than 9 yards, you're talking about a 35 to 40% chance of completing a football. That's why you're seeing all the short bubble screens. It's never been more evident. That is it. That stat, I mean, I've said it. I've seen it with my own eyeballs. I just haven't sat down and done the stats. Good job, Pro Football Focus. Good job for Eric Kane for finding that. It's simple to me. I mean, that's it. They're afraid to throw the ball downfield with Joe Milton. Fact. So nothing's going to change significantly until they're not afraid. But can he do anything at this point? Can he have such a great Thursday practice, Caleb, that they say, let's throw this ball all over the park? Why, no.
I mean, I think they're hoping for that because, again, South Carolina, listen to me, Texas A&M does not have a good secondary. And they have an amazing run defense. Tennessee's not going to be able to run the ball on A&M the way they've been running the ball. That I can tell you right now, that's not going to happen. So they need Joe Milton to step up. I don't think they think he can. And that's why they did all those screens against South Carolina 2 weeks ago. Your best hope is they dialed up a few designed calls, like maybe 3 that they hope work in the game. And that's the best.
Dan says he throws more than 9 yards when he throws across the field. And we had somebody challenge you on a YouTube channel that said, I bet Caleb couldn't stand on one side of the field and one hop it to the other side of the field. So the 50 to the 50. And I'm like, well, of course he couldn't. I mean, that is incredible. That's a 50. That's a 40-yard throw and a good bounce.
That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There, I said it. The thing that
could you do it though? Could you do it?
Probably not. As a matter of fact, I played baseball, and my biggest weakness playing baseball was I had a bad arm. So I mean, I had a terrible arm, and so they tried to hide me in the field. And in middle school they put you in right field, and high school they tried to put you at second base, or just anywhere where you just don't have a good arm. So yeah, I have a terrible arm. Guess what? I'm not starting at quarterback for Tennessee. This drives me crazy. I'm analyzing what Joe Milton can do because Joe Milton's playing quarterback for Tennessee. So you don't get to compare me to Joe Milton. This is like when people judge mistakes politicians make, and they're like, well, could you do any better? Well, I'm not running for anything. I'm not making decisions for the country. So
I tell you who's making great decisions. It's the customers at Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals, a Tennessee tradition? RickTerryJewelry.com. RickTerryJewelry.com. What the H brought to you by Sports Treasures.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
All right, so I'm going to trust my guy Caleb on this because when I see the term deep historical ties, it means that Caleb knows something about Tennessee football history that I do not, and I'm willing to admit that. So what are those ties? Brought to you by Sports Treasures that has your ties to the past with over 5 million sports treasures and memorabilia right there, including my book, which you can order right down below. And we would certainly love for you to do that. I see some ratings on Amazon. Certainly appreciate you that have purchased that there, but love to give you an autographed copy as well. So you can go to offthehooksports.com and order one, or you can go to Sports Treasures and follow them on Facebook if you want to find a good deal or something kind of cool, especially with the upcoming holiday season. Sports Treasures TN on Facebook. Sports Treasures TN on Facebook. Caleb, these Vols Aggies ties. I don't see a lot of ties, but I know you do. So I see basically the games that I've been alive for that they played, but I know you can go much deeper in that. Deep dive, Caleb. Learn some stuff. Here, take me, young man.
So they have played 4 times in history. There are just the only 4 times they've played, and then there are the deep, direct ties they have beyond playing each other. Do you want me to start with the games themselves or the ties they have that go beyond the games?
You start with whatever you think's most compelling.
Okay, so these ties, guys, by the way, go all the way back to the 1900s. I mean, the first decade of the 20th century. So Texas A&M, one of their first coaches ever was Charlie Moran, who played for Tennessee in 1897. He was a young guy who played for Texas A&M's freshman team under Charlie Moran at Texas A&M in 1910 by the name of Robert Nealand, who played at Texas A&M. He then transferred to West Point, so he's considered a West Point grad, but he was on the A&M freshman team. And for those who forget, he is from Texas, Nealand is. Now, Charlie Moran then recommended Nealand for the assistant coaching job at Tennessee in 1925, and then he became the head coach a year later. So Texas A&M produced Robert Nealand. That's the start. And Tennessee produced the coach who found Robert Nealand when he was at Texas A&M. So there's already that connection. Now it goes a little deeper. 1939. Texas A&M's their only AP national title is 1939 when they went undefeated. Very controversial because as you know, Dave, during that time, the national champion was determined before the bowl games, right? Bowls were just an exhibition. The regular season mattered. Tennessee finished the regular season undefeated, untied, and unscored on, and they were in the midst of a 23-game winning streak that dated back to 1937, and they had won a share of the national title in 1938. By any reasonable metric, they should have been number 1 in the AP poll. However, because George Cafago was hurt, the polls took that into account for some reason, and they gave the national title to Texas A&M, who was also undefeated. Very controversial national title. Tennessee should have been named national title that year. Tennessee did lose to USC in the Rose Bowl, but again, bowls were exhibitions, and George Cafago wasn't playing in that game because he was hurt. So,
not to mention that it would be North Mexico A&M if not for the Tennessee Volunteers that saved that state. Just go ahead and throw that out there. What about that?
That's a very, very good point. That's a great point. And okay, so
let me ask you this: you have one word to describe Texas A&M as a program, as a college football program. Do we have any more ties to Tennessee, or can I ask this?
There's so many more. I've got to keep going. It's way deeper than you realize.
Okay, roll me out a couple more. Then I want everybody on the message board to think about this and give me a word. It's fill in the blank time, and the word is Texas A&M's program is blank.
Well, I've already done my word's easy for that, but it's I'll get to that. So, okay, so 1957, Tennessee plays Texas A&M in the Gator Bowl. That's Bear Bryant's last game at Texas A&M before he takes the coaching job at Alabama, and Tennessee beats Texas A&M in that game. All right, so moving on forward, 1980s, Jackie Sherrill built his career at Texas A&M. Sherrill was a protege of Johnny Majors.
Yes,
when they were at Pitt. Now, here's the big one.
Jackie Sherrill, the only coach to wear snakeskin boots to SEC Media Days. Continue, sir.
Oh, that's great. So Tennessee,
the real pointy ones too.
So Tennessee emerged as a national power thanks to Robert Nealand. They owe that to Texas A&M. They also owe their 98 national title to Texas A&M because a former Tennessee quarterback, who lost his starting job to Peyton Manning and Brandon Stewart, transferred to Texas A&M and then upset Kansas State in the 98 Big 12 title game. And even though Tennessee was the better team than Kansas State during that time, John Chavis had no idea how to defend the triple option. So, Dave, I'm thoroughly convinced if Tennessee's playing Kansas State in the national title, Kansas State wins that game.
All right. Here, fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. On the message board, Texas A&M's football program is blank. Is blank. What is yours?
Underachieving. They are a program that has all the infrastructure to have been a top 10 program in history, and they're not top 25. They're the Mets of college football.
Well, couldn't they be the Braves, who only win one championship under 14 years with Bobby Cox? I mean,
no, because the Braves were contenders. Texas A&M has spent half their time not even being contenders.
No.
Like, that's...
I just think they're goofy. That's my word, is goofy. And let me hear your word. But they've got like a little border collie that they run around, which is not intimidating. If you stand next to Mike the Tiger in his cage at LSU and he hisses at you, you may need to go to the restroom really quickly. I'm not worried about the border collie. Also, it went viral this week. Their little rah-rah chant thing they do. I don't know if you saw that, where they do whoa, and it's just awful and incredibly weird. So that's terrible. They're goofy because they think that they can just go out and buy things, and maybe they can, but they can't necessarily buy championships. So I would just go goofy. How about you on the message board? Lassie, or do you mean lazy? I don't know if they're lazy. They're trying to spend money.
No, Lassie is a border collie.
Oh, Lassie, yes.
So look, I think Texas A&M has had, I don't know what the problem is with them as a program. I don't know why they have been so, I don't know why they were never on the level of Texas historically, because they should have been there. They should be a top 10 program of all time. If you look at their history and look at recruiting in Texas and the oil money that's down there. And also, here's the weird part. Yeah, University of Texas is in Austin, but East Texas is where all the talent is in Texas, right? For recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, I never.
Texas A&M is a lot closer to the talent proximity wise than Texas, right?
All right, there you go. Dan gets us rolling. Not well coached. Okay, that's a good one. What else from the message board?
I mean, I think
Goofy is still the best.
Yeah, but like, okay, they have Lassie, but Georgia has Uga. That's laughable too. Are you threatened by a little bulldog?
What about the 12th man thing where some guy just ran in from the stands and played? Is that a good college football tradition, or is that just kind of goofy?
It's better than Mississippi State's cowbells because a cow got loose in Starkville.
No way. Cowbell way better. Starkville, very underrated venue.
No, the stadium, not the town. Yeah. Not the town, okay? I would rather live in Auburn than Starkville, and that's saying something, because Auburn is the worst place in the SEC to live.
Yeah, but very, very loud there, so I'll give them credit. Well, I'm going with goofy, unless anybody has a better one. I think it's just kind of a goofy program. You see the teams that are coming over to the SEC. Texas is Texas, right? Oklahoma is Oklahoma, right? And you had Texas.
But why
A&M.
has Texas A&M never been on that level? That's the weird part.
They're not the state school. It's the same thing with Alabama, Auburn, and that means something to some kids.
But Auburn has some national championships in recent years to their resume. Texas A&M's got nothing, and that's the weird part. And also, again,
brother.
Texas A&M's not the state school, but Oklahoma has more tradition than A&M by getting Texas recruits. So how does Oklahoma have more tradition than Texas or Texas A&M for that matter?
My prediction for the weekend brought to you by Tennessee Cider Company, the original hard cider of the Smoky Mountains. Use the promo code HAT to receive some free swag with your cider order. Available most anywhere in the United States. Use the promo code HAT. So here it is. So you can go ahead and clip this out so we can run it next week. Everybody's saying that this is going to be a close game, that it's going to be the under. Caleb, we've gotten your prediction. Here's my prediction. Tennessee sets its offense up or scores themselves with their defense in their front seven, not once, but twice. I think that they'll have that sort of success against A&M's front. And I think Max Johnson holds on to the ball too long. There will be a strip sack. There will be some sort of issue in which Tennessee sets up its offense to score twice. So I don't even think it's close, because I think everybody thinks they've got it figured out, and they don't. So I'm going to say Tennessee 42 to Texas A&M 17. That's my pick. Cut that because it's on the money. I'm feeling this one, Caleb, and I never say that, do I? I never say I'm good at gambling, do I?
No, you don't.
I got this one. 42-17. Mark it down.
Right. Actually, what you said fits right into my prop bets, funny enough, because there's some good prop bets to make on this, but I'm going Tennessee 27-20, like almost last week's Alabama game, pretty much. is what I think happens with Tennessee.
There we go. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave
Wait,
Hooker.
we got to give the prop. Wait, we're not going to give out the prop bets real quick?
Oh, let's give out the prop bets. I missed the prop bets. Lay them on me. All right,
Okay.
let's get through it.
So, all right, prop bets. So there are 5. First one is Texas A&M.
This is actually the best part of the show on a Friday, and I messed it up. I'm sorry. Let me go through them, and I'll call them off to you. Texas A&M with a defensive touchdown is a plus 490.
That's crazy.
I don't think they'll score a defensive touchdown. Do you?
Tennessee's more prone to turnovers this year than they were last year, and Texas A&M scored 2 defensive touchdowns against Arkansas.
Yeah, I still wouldn't take that. I know it's a plus 490, so $100 gets you 490. But Tennessee football defensive touchdown.
Hey now.
I'll take that plus 500.
Wow. See, I say take both. I take both. Take whatever you want to bet on one, half it, and bet on, because there will be put it this way, in general, how much would you put on there would be a defensive touchdown in this game? That should almost be a minus, shouldn't it? That should almost be like you'd have to bet over $100 to win 100, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with that at all. And then you've got Aeneas Smith scores the touchdown. He has been the leading receiver for A&M. But
he has.
Go ahead.
He has no touchdowns on the year, even though he's been the leading receiver. But I think that's law of averages tells me that's going to change. He's got to get a touchdown at some point if he's the leading receiver, and he also has a punt return touchdown. So I think he's going to get something this weekend.
So give me a prop bet number on tackles for a loss and sacks. As I share with you that Caleb Calhoun says Max Johnson under 207.5 passing yards. We'll see if he's able to be held under that by Tennessee's defense. And then number 1, Joe Milton under 250 passing yards. That's right at that number that if he's sitting there, it's probably a ball game. If he's sitting at 240, if he gets over that, I think Tennessee pulls away. So what is the over-under on sacks and or tackles for a loss? Can you pull that up?
There is none set by FanDuel or Zen or anything. Nobody set a total for sacks or tackles for a loss. So
okay.
we should set it ourselves.
Okay, I'm going to set it at 3.5. Got the over or the under?
On sacks?
Yes.
Over. Did you watch Texas A&M last week?
Yeah, that made it too easy. Okay, if I went 4.5. 4.5.
Over. At home with the crowd, there's going to be some communication issues for Max Johnson and the offensive line. That'll just create 2 sacks on its own.
Yeah, so I would have to still take the over, but I think the number is 4. But I like put it in a half so that we have to go one direction or the other. Tackles for a loss, put it at 9.5.
Yep. I'll go under on that, actually. I'll go under. So I think Texas A&M's going to just desperately throw it all over the field in this game. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of chances for tackles for a loss, but I think there's going to be a lot of pressures on Max Johnson in this one. Now, on the other side, do you think Texas A&M gets any sacks or tackles for a loss? I mean, their pass rush is good too. What's your over under with that one?
I think they're going to throw a lot of bubble screens. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. We're live with you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. Over the weekend too. We'll be able to break down the Vols right after the game. We always love to do that. So hit that like and subscribe button. If you haven't to this point, please do so. Tell a friend. We greatly appreciate that. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This has been